of the Bold Strokes Summer Bookathon. I'm Aurora Ray, and I am joined today by two of my favorite people, Angie Williams and Meghan O'Brien. I'm not the sort of host or moderator today, but I was the designated, hey, share all the housekeeping stuff. Angie, Meghan, hello. It's lovely to see you. How are you?
I thought that we had agreed that whenever it's the three of us, you're always in charge.
If I could tell you how I'm not the case, that I'm only bossy at work. Everywhere else, I prefer to not be the bossy one. All right, who's the boss at your house?
Well,
that's an ongoing discussion, ongoing debate.
It is an ongoing discussion. The dogs listen to me more. And so I try to say it's
to get them to come indoors, basically.
I'm the alpha, like Meghan will just beg for them to come inside, and I just whistle and they come running, and
I can't do the whistle.
They listen to me. But Meghan completely disagrees. Like she's
I say the dogs you may be their alpha, but I feel I'm your alpha.
For sure. For sure. I mean, I did, yesterday morning, I went out and got Meghan pumpkin muffins and smoothie before she woke up. And then this morning I went out and got her donuts before she woke up. And I get up at 5 to take care of the dogs. And so that's who's in charge.
Well, and one of our dogs is only our dog because I really, really wanted to foster her to see if it would work out. And Angie really didn't, but 8 years later, she's still here. So I'd say I'm in charge slightly.
Well, she convinced me. She was at in front of a pet store, and so she convinced me to foster her for a year, but we had a 2-dog limit
for a week. Actually, it was supposed to be for a week, not for a year.
So we were gonna foster her for a week, and so then we left, and as we're driving home, we got maybe a mile away from the place where
this was before you agreed to foster, because this was when I was like, well, we could at least foster her as we were driving away. After it was like, well, no, we can't.
That's right. We didn't even have her. We were driving away, and Meghan was like, well, we could at least foster her. I really would have loved if we could have fostered her at least. Yeah.
But it probably won't work out because we had Jack and Jagger at the time, our Great Dane and Shepherd Pit mixes, and they had a very nice brotherly bond and energy, and it was all was well. And I was like, let's just bring her home. It probably won't work out. They probably won't even like each other, etc. Well, it'll be easy to take her back. And then we got her home.
When Meghan says, I wish we could have done this. Like,
it wasn't quite in that tone. That's how it sounds in her head, which is helpful to me.
Oh, man. I just got off the freeway, turned around, came back, and we're still fostering her. It's been like 9 years.
Yeah.
You literally made the loop. You were in the car and you left and then turned around.
Yeah, we were on the freeway on the way home, and she was just like, I wish we could have fostered her at least. I cannot say no to Meghan about anything. It's the worst because she can get a little crazy about things. And I cannot refuse anything that's going to make her happy.
That's not quite true. We'd probably have a 4th dog right now if that were true.
Oh, that is true.
But actually, I had a question for you, Aurora, because I didn't even know you were fostering 2 dogs right now. And what kind of dogs? What size? What kind of mixes?
So I adopted Oliver through Cayuga Dog Rescue. I have fostered through them in the past. And they sent an email out to the listserv about 4 dogs whose owner was going into the hospital with sort of end-of-life cancer. And they were looking for some foster homes. And they're all seniors. And that's the sadder and the older, just give it to me. I love puppies, they're adorable, but I'm a sucker for the old ones. And so I said that I could foster this white terrier. She was a little skittish, a little barky. I'm like, oh, I can handle that. Oliver's totally neurotic and high maintenance, that's my jam. But her name is Becky.
Oh, I love it. That's wonderful.
Becky and her brother Shaggy were bonded. They've lived their whole lives together. So I have a black and a white terrier mix right now with Oliver and Mabel. So it is a very full house. We are trying to kind of sort out how it's going to work, and it's going to be an adventure. It's actually probably for the best that I'm fostering both, because if I was just fostering one, I might succumb. I'm pretty sure 4 dogs is too much for one person. So I do feel like they are going to go.
That's the way to do it. You're right. Angie, we should foster a litter of puppies, because like I know we can't keep a litter of puppies.
Oh my God. So yeah. So our son has 4 snakes, and one of them has decided that he will no longer eat like frozen thawed mice. Yeah. So we are going to have to find a new home for the snake, because now we're having to get live mice. And both
and yeah, he started to eat again with the live mice.
So he started eating again. He hadn't eaten in like 6 months, and then he started eating again because we're giving him live mice. And both our son and Meghan are really struggling with this live mouse thing. So every time Meghan is like, I hope I have a pet mouse. Like, she's wanting them.
I really want one to survive.
Not to eat the mouse, because she's going to keep the mouse. I'm just like, no.
Well, absolutely. If the snake had not eaten the mouse in a reasonable amount of time, that mouse has been tortured. I'm going to like care for that mouse the rest of its life. It's already been through trauma. I'm never putting it in a snake cage again. That's awful. It's awful. Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like fish in a barrel, like sitting duck. Like,
yeah. Oh God,
just a mouse like crawling around. Like,
I didn't want to know, but I haven't seen any of these mice, because I wanted to see the first one, and my son said, no, I don't think it's a good idea, Mom. He's really cute. And so I was like, you're right. Thank you for the warning. I'm not going to look at it. And then when he went up to feed, it's like he went up, and about 30 seconds later, his door slammed, and you could just hear him, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, running down the stairs, because the snake was extremely eager, and the mouse didn't have time to run around a lot, it sounds like. But
probably for the best.
Yeah, probably for the best. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's how it's.
But I cried when I heard.
She cried. She literally cried. So we've got to find a home for the snake.
Yeah.
Oh, how often? Okay, I'm gonna ask one more question, and we're gonna talk about writing, because I don't.
Oh. They eat usually once a week or once every 2 weeks. Depends on how old they are. And
if they're a big snake, it might be more like once a month.
Yeah.
It is for anybody who has kids or nephews or nieces or whatever. They actually are the perfect pet for kids. They're so low maintenance. I mean, you feed them once a week, maybe once every couple
something
weeks.
Like a corn snake or something.
Every time they eat, they go to the bathroom basically once. You clean it up. That's really all they require. Keep their water bowl full. It's a great pet, but horrifying if they don't want frozen food. Even though frozen food freaks me out, so the live food's unacceptable.
Yeah, snakes are super cool. I get a lot of garter snakes around my house, and other than startling me,
yeah,
they're fun and kind of fascinating.
I have a question for you about writing, Aurora.
Okay, what's that?
How is it writing? Because I know you've constantly got like 3 projects going on. How is it with these new foster dogs with your writing? Like, is it just adding to the chaos?
Well, I picked them up Friday.
So
I haven't gotten any writing done this weekend. So
we'll see.
I think the dogs, it's going to work out, but they're a little restless at night. That, my dogs are old. They're pretty good at sleeping through the night. So we've got a little bit of settling in. It's actually the return to the office that I think is going to be cramping my writing style lately. I feel like I worked a lot, during the pandemic. I didn't, go away too often to do laundry and stuff, but the commuting, the extra peopling.
It's a lot. I've only worked a few days in the office, because luckily my employer is taking more hybrid approach, which they've pulled back even, I think, with the Delta thing. But I've worked, I think, 2 full days in the office in the last year and a half or whatever. And they were long days. I forgot how, and I work longer days at home because I don't stand up and leave at 5. I tend to just keep going for a little while. So I think actually I've been working more during the pandemic than I did before, but just not having to be at a desk in another building, and and not have my dogs near me to pet, and everything else. It makes it feel a lot more. So
yeah, I'm able to get more done. I'm able to get more done working from home.
Yeah.
I mean, I do find that there's a struggle of like, I don't have as good of boundaries, right? Like it sort of feels like work has seeped into my house, but I don't like. But now I'm curious about you, Angie, because like I know Meghan in her heart of hearts is an introvert, as I am. For me, I mean, the pandemic has only made that more so. Like the sort of having to just constantly interact. I can do it. It's just exhausting. But you strike me, Angie, as at least somewhat extroverted.
Mm-hmm.
Are you like, I know going back has felt hard, but like do you like the people? People is a verb now. Like I
peopling.
How do you feel about
I love peopling. I don't like, my job is really weird. It's a weird dynamic at the place I work now. Than it's different from any place I've ever worked. Like there's been much more camaraderie at previous jobs. This one, everybody kind of has their own space and nobody really talks to each other that much. So, I didn't miss work in that way. The people that I would talk to at work, we would call each other when we were working from home. We would still kind of call each other and chat a little bit. So that didn't really change a lot. What I really miss is being able to get out of this house and go places, like, and it doesn't even have to be in crowds. Just, I really miss, going to museums or
going to the coast and chatting up the lady who's going to sell you your fish taco. Angie loves stuff like that. She likes to strike up conversations with people she just randomly meets throughout her travels. And I think that you get a lot of satisfaction from that. And I know
I do, for sure. I like to learn learn things about new people and their lives. And I mean, and I think that makes you a better author, like talking to people and learning the different kind of aspects of people's personalities and different lives that people have had. That can lead to interesting characters and stories.
Okay, that's fair. Like, I will give you that. And I wish I was more comfortable with it or liked it more.
Mm-hmm.
Meghan, I'm curious about you, like where, like you've been writing for so long, like, but I know you're like an introvert and shy. I don't think I'm like outing you when I say that. But as someone who sort of doesn't thrive on that just kind of casual interaction, meeting new people, like where do you get some of your ideas for characters, like especially like those smaller details that like kind of make characters?
I think like I'm also really interested in people, but it's in a more like observing them way, not interacting with them way. like I'm Jane Goodall or whatever, and I'm like fascinated, even though I don't always quite relate or understand or whatever. It's just human behavior is really interesting to me. And I've read a lot about psychology. I've gone to therapy myself. I'm somebody who thinks a lot about myself as a person. And I think that also helps me create characters, because it's sort of, I'm interested in people as a concept, I guess. I don't need to talk to real people. I interact with them enough, I think. I am one. I do a little research that way, I guess. But also, I do, even though I'm an introvert, I form very close friendships with people, and I do talk a lot with those people, and, fairly personally and intimately with those people, so I can learn about human behavior and stuff like that in that way too. But yeah, like I love having somebody like Angie around, because it's perfect if you are like me, because you are going to have to, the lady at the store is going to chat you up. And if the person next to you is excited about it and is just going to, and then I don't have to, and it's wonderful. So I
You just sit, you just stand to the side and watch.
Yeah, and then I get the benefit of that in-person interaction because I'm just standing by watching it happen masterfully, but I don't have to do it myself. So
it's funny when we go to a party, Meghan will kind of stand behind me and kind of hold my arm. You know, I mean, not totally behind me, but she'll kind of stand a little, you know, definitely let me be kind of in front and I'll be the chatty one. And then as she has more wine, she kind of comes like more forward.
And I get chattier myself.
Then she's chatty.
Yeah, that always helps.
I'm with you. I almost poured a glass of wine for this because I moderated the panel before. And I like, especially after being in the office all last week, I'm like, oh,
it's a lot.
It's virtual, but like I have to talk with people for 2 hours. I'm like terrified.
No, do you drink wine when you write? Or do you, I know you drink old fashions and, you know, not just wine, but.
You know, I do probably 3/4 of my writing in the morning before work. So no,
yeah,
that's
how I am.
An interesting work day, but after work, my brain's pretty fried. Every now and then I'll do a little in the evening, but whether I like to admit it or not, I get up an hour early in the morning to write. So it's me and the first cup of coffee.
I write in the morning too. That's when my head is like the clearest, when I can just focus on that and not everything else that's been happening during the day. And, you know, it's like all of this stuff has kind of gotten me amped up, and it's, you know, getting that out of my brain and focusing on two people kissing is hard. But Meghan writes at night. She almost 100%.
I don't function in the morning. I don't think I am even really awake much before 11 most mornings.
She has a 9:30 rule where I can't speak to her before 9:30 or she will disassemble me.
I have to be awake for work. You know, I start work at 8. So I have to be during the weekdays. But by the time I get to the end of the day, I'm the same, where I'm so wrecked, it's hard for me to get into that sort of creative space because I'm already so tapped out.
When we were first together, she used to call me Gabrielle because in the morning I'm like pretty upbeat. I'm a morning person, and I was good morning, you know. And she was like, "Oh my God, Gabrielle!"
I'm not having it. Oh, I love that. I saw her too. Meghan, I'm curious about, you know, like, you're obviously a night person. Do you have like a bed time, like when you do write at night, like when you're sort of in that zone or on deadline? I find on deadline is often more compelling than being in the zone. Like, I find that having like the 45 minutes to an hour that I have in the morning, that limitation actually like
probably helps
me be more productive. Like if I have a whole Saturday, I'm like, I'm going to write all day. I'd probably write the same as I would write in the 45 minutes I have in the morning. Like I the confined time, I need it. So do you give yourself that, or do you stay?
No, I don't. And I probably should. I should probably, you know, start thinking in that direction. I mean, it used to be that, I mean, I go really hot and cold. And I was recently diagnosed with ADHD, which explains a lot of things about my work style and when things are difficult and why things are difficult for me. So, I mean, it's really hot or cold. I can hyper focus, and Angie knows I have days where I will write for literally like 8 hours straight. And that's all I do. And I am completely there. And then I have days where it's like, okay, I'm going to write. It's, you know, I finally can do this. And then I screw around and go off on a tangent, and I'm going to research this one thing. And then, like, you know, an hour and a half later, realize I'm still, you know, I'm down some YouTube hole that has nothing to do with anything. And so, yeah, if I have too much unstructured time, I can definitely meander. But if I'm in the right space and I have an entire day, I can slaughter that day potentially. So I'm trying to learn how to block out distractions more, because certainly, especially since we got our schnauzer, there's been more distractions, and she's pretty demanding, entitled little shit, whom I love completely. But she's constantly just sort of scratching me, wanting things, and, you know, kind of interrupting me, and just pandemic in general, and just all these sorts of distractions. I'm, you know, trying to learn how to manage them. And I think that probably having more limited, defined periods of time would be helpful. So I'll try that. Thank you, Aurora.
Yeah, it's fascinating because sometimes I feel like not a terribly creative person because I'm kind of methodical about it. Like, I mean, I skip around, I write out of order, I do things like that, but like, I don't like one time in my whole life, and it's because I was on deadline, I wrote 10,000 words in one 3-day weekend. Like, I don't work that way. And I actually, the only way I was able to do it was like 500 word increments. I like wrote 500 words, gave myself a star, and then got up.
That's probably so much healthier than what I do.
But like, I've sort of always been a little envious of that like mad genius of like for like 8 hours, and you don't like, I just don't work that way.
Like
but
in movies.
It's probably better.
Like in movies when somebody's like, ching.
Blessing and a curse. Angie, what is you like? Are you sort of this? Are you the slow and steady, or are you these like mad bouts of creative energy and inspiration?
I could do like a 2,000 word like burst. That's kind of my max, you know. But I will like if it's coming to my brain and it's, you know, coming out, like Meghan and I are very, very different because I will just write, and then I'll go back and read it and edit it after. I just am like trying to get, like, it's flowing out of my brain and I'm just trying to get it out. Meghan is constantly editing as she goes along. It slows her down, and she is such a perfectionist. You know, she will spend forever on one passage, just like hours, you know, trying to get it just right. And I think it's
become a problem.
I think that's one of the things that's kept her from writing, you know. Aww.
I love you.
I think that's one of the things that's kind of prohibiting her from enjoying writing.
I fell into more of a perfectionist, like I really should lower my internal standards slightly kind of thing at some point. And I would love to be able to just, and I know it's the correct thing to do. I think it's the healthier thing. I think it's, you know, I know it's the right thing to do. And I would love to be able to just, because I edit like crazy. Even when I self-edit the whole way through, I'm still going to edit 3 times afterwards. Oh, baby, love me.
Everybody wants to start. This is Becky.
Oh, Becky.
She hasn't been to the groomer yet.
I think it's best that we don't live too close to you, because I would have to talk about who's in charge again. I love Becky. Oh man. But yeah. So I'm gonna try little writing sessions. That's a great idea. Oh my God.
That's Shaggy. Everybody's got to say hi now. Sorry.
Well, and by the way, even if it's a lot of work, I mean, good on you for fostering a bonded pair like that. Mm-hmm. I also have a soft spot for seniors. I'm actually thinking that my next dog will probably be like a senior foster thing. I love Mabel, and it just warms my heart every time I see a picture of her. And like when I look at, you know, rescue stuff and I see the bonded pairs, like that just really, really, especially because our dogs Riley and Daisy are a bonded pair now. And if something were to happen to us, I know that if they tried to separate them, that Daisy would fall apart. I mean, she wouldn't function. And so it's just like, you know, and I worry about that or whatever. So it's just people who will bring in, you know, the bonded pairs so that they can stay together and, you know, foster them so they can get home together. It's just so special. So thank you.
Well, you know, it's fun. I know a lot of people sort of, you know, I've had a couple foster failures, but there's something super exciting when the right family finds, you know, the people, right? And like, that's kind of the whole point, and it gives them a chance. So yeah. Sorry. We were talking about being creative, and then we got sidetracked by.
Well, you know, they introduced themselves. We had to acknowledge them.
I will jump in real quick to remind folks in the audience, we've got a great number of attendees here. Feel free to drop questions in the Q&A box. We would love to hear from you. I'm sure we will have no trouble filling tangents for the 50 minutes we've been allotted, but we're happy to answer questions. We actually have one about do our pets, do foster dogs experiences like that? Do they show up in your books? So specifically with foster dogs. I've not written foster dogs into books, but lots of rescue dogs. Built to Last had a rescue goat, and I've kind of wanted to revisit goats, and so that's featuring prominently in the book that I'm just kind of submitting now, and it will be out next spring. Some goats and dogs and cats, but pets are. I love writing pets into books because they're they're such an integral part of my life. I can't sort of imagine life without them, but there is a lot of housekeeping, right? Like if your characters are going to have sleepovers at each other's houses, like they need to go out, like you don't have to write it all, but you can't just like
forget about them,
right?
Yeah.
Like that. I think it once in a book.
It softens a character like nothing else.
So how do you incorporate animals into your story? I'm like just asking the question because it kind of something similar popped up in Q&A, but now I'm curious. How do you think about incorporating animals into your story?
You go, Maggie.
Most of my books, I think, have some animal at some point, and I think all of I can't remember if Daisy's made it into the story yet. She may not have, and Walter certainly hasn't because we just got him last summer. I expect they'll be in future stories. All of our dogs show up, and cats have really shown up in stories in one of my books somewhere. And obviously the most prominent example would be Battle Scars. The main character has a Great Dane named Jagger, who is her therapy dog. And the other character is a vet who has a Shepherd Pit mix named Jack. And they're both modeled after the real life Jack and Jagger. And so that was like the biggest starring roles I've given pets. But I think even in at the end of Her Best Friend's Sister, they're talking about their new puppy Riley, which would be our puppy Riley that we had at the time. So yeah,
which is also in my book, Mending Fences.
Yeah. Riley's actually gotten into 2 books with her authors, so she's pretty accomplished now as a character. Yeah,
I love that. It's funny. Like I always write pets, and I sort of sometimes write pets that, obviously the goats that I don't have but want, beagles and hound dogs and things that I haven't adopted but sort of have a soft spot for. But I realize now the only sort of real life thing that's had a formal cameo is my tractor, not my my tractor Roberta got a cameo.
Oh, that's funny.
It's funny.
That maybe says something.
It is funny.
There should be more books with Foster. You what?
Talk amongst yourselves. Somebody's driving by.
Oh, okay. I was thinking the same thing, that a foster dog would be a good idea because that would maybe help encourage people to realize like that's something you can do.
You should do that, Megan.
A lot of people. What's that?
You should write something with foster.
Yeah. But I think that's wonderful. My sister actually just, and her family just adopted. Well, they're still technically fostering because the rescue has a 4-week trial period. I think you're going to see our son for a moment, maybe.
Yeah, he's going in front of me here.
Okay.
Stick your head over here.
Yeah.
Like, stick your head down.
That's how tall he is now. That's what happens. Come out during the event. You have to get on camera then.
He's so not impressed.
But yeah, no, that's wonderful. And I think it's the rescue my sister and her family are dealing with right now. Just have as a general rule, you get like a 4-week trial period. So it's kind of a foster or adopt situation no matter what, which is nice. Because I think fostering is just kind of nice in that respect anyways, rather than just kind of necessarily adopting a dog that may not work out for you and you have no plan for what would happen if it doesn't. But yeah,
we've fostered a couple times. We've never adopted.
Failed, luckily. It was good. Our first foster dog, she came in, she barked at the TV at night, and none of our other dogs ever had done that, and it was a little disruptive. And I remember she barked in the middle of the night and woke us up, and then she played really well with our shepherd, but she played really hard and she ripped his cheek open, Jack. And so it was like, at the end of that, we actually had her over like the holidays. It was just like a short-term foster. And it was like at the end of it, like, okay, bye, Pebbles. Like, but
She was really sweet. It wasn't aggressive. It was just
very sweet. I liked her a lot, but it was a good foster experience because it was like, she's not right for us in these certain ways, but she needs a place to be over Thanksgiving, and that, you know, we'll love her and spoil her and all that good stuff. It was fun. So even short-term fostering can be fun.
Yeah, for sure. I've sort of done that sort of babysitting thing. I had a one-eyed dog foster once, and her name was Bean, but we called her Pirate Eye. And so we sang Hall & Oates Private Eye, but Pirate Eye. It's too much to her. Okay, so I'm curious about now, like what other, besides our mutual affection for rescue pets, like what other things have you incorporated in stories, or do you think you would want to incorporate stories, like just things that you care about, that you want to shine a light on, causes or like things you want people to be better educated or know better about? Not that like we write books to sort of get on soapboxes, but I think we all incorporate things that we care about and are passionate about into our stories. What are some things that you have done or you are thinking about?
I will start since Angie looks like she's not going to. For me, obviously, I think a big theme in most of my books are is characters who deal with anxiety or depression or other mental illness in some way. Something that I'm very familiar with personally, and that I think is just a lot of people deal with those things, and they don't always get talked about a lot in books, where, you know, a lot of times the characters are just living these wonderful sorts of lives, and they're rich and they're beautiful, and they're, you know, I kind of like, you know, telling stories about the people who aren't those people, and to, you know, have their big struggles. I think, you know, and when I wrote Battle Scars, I specifically wanted to write something about PTSD and about experience of a lot of women in the military. That was kind of came after I read an article about, you know, at the time, I think it was, you know, kind of around, you know, all the people stationed in Iraq. And it was, you know, a lot of women who were being attacked, you know, going to the bathroom at night, you know, by their colleagues. And so that, you know, really, that article really struck me, and just the experience of PTSD in general, you know, and from combat or just in the military, non-combat experiences. Yeah, so for me, it's usually around, I guess, different mental health issues or struggles. I think most of my characters are dealing with that in some way, or trust issues / vulnerability in general, just learning to trust somebody else. That seems to be the thing that I'm really focused on.
I love that.
How about you, Angie?
I think, you know, one thing, and I kind of, a part that was taken out of Mending Fences, and I can't remember why, but I think maybe I felt a little like I had it in there, and then I started to feel a little vulnerable about it and took it out. But there was kind of a lot more. I think Bobby talks a little bit in Mending Fences about just being like a masculine lesbian, and the like navigating the world as a masculine lesbian, and just kind of what that means, and you know, how the world perceives you, and the difficulties, like, you know, going to the bathroom, like, where do you go? You know, do you just go to the women's restroom and very likely get harassed about it, or do you just go to the men's restroom and feel awkward about, you know, going into the men's restroom? Like, it's just a very awkward thing. And so I thought about you know, kind of diving into that a little more. I think for my first novel, it was that was a lot to take on, you know, in addition to like writing your first novel and all of the stresses that come along with that. So I might you know, think more about that in the future. And I also like one future novel that I kind of have in my pile is possibly something set like just post Civil War. of someone who murdered someone, but murdered her stepfather, who was trying to rape and kill her, and joins the Civil War, joins the army, and as a man, and is hiding, we've all read stories like this. Hopefully I'll be able to put a kind of an interesting, different twist on it. But I think that is kind of like the ultimate, right? Like woman living in this masculine world, and like how you navigate that. So I don't know.
Super interesting.
And I was going to say the other thing that I forgot to say that I was going to say was I think the other thing that has always been really important to me was depicting like sex as in a sort of frank way, in a sort of realistic way, no euphemisms, and not the kinds of sex scenes that I first started out reading in lesbian novels, where it's very very samey and people kind of come right away, and so I mean that depicting women having different kinds of sex, and certainly I know kinds of sex that make some women, some lesbians uncomfortable at times, but just kind of, I don't know, destigmatizing the idea that like you can have fun, you can role play, you can do all these things during sex, and it doesn't have to mean anything other than you are having fun during sex, and you don't always have to be flowery and loving and to have sex as a loving couple. It can be a little dirty or a little rough or whatever. And so I think just kind of destigmatizing and showing the broad spectrum of sexuality of women loving women, and it doesn't always look like one thing. Basically was probably another thing focused on.
I love those answers. That's fantastic.
How about you?
I think, I think one of the things, I think we often sort of tap into sort of our own experiences. I think I have wrestled with mental illness. It's something that I haven't personally struggled with as much as, but I grew up in a family that had pretty severe mental illness. And it's something that I sort of think about, and I'm sort of figuring out how I'd like to grapple with it. I think writing in some ways is a little bit therapy. I do a lot with, I think a lot about like body issues and sort of traditional, body types beyond the sort of like the sort of American standards of beauty. And I think, I've written quite a few characters who struggle with their body image, a few who've sort of come out the other side. And it makes me think about the fact that I've never written a character who's like a fat character, a plus size character, and who is just innately comfortable and confident in that. Mm-hmm. And like it strikes me, it's like, oh, well, like that should be a character too. So I sort of find things like that I think about a lot. I've written trans secondary characters. I haven't done a main character yet, but I think
that's another that I would like to as well. I mean, I certainly have what I would consider a trans character, non-binary. I don't know. At the time, and the terminology has changed so much since I wrote Kale in the 3. At the time, I considered Kale to be genderqueer. I don't know if that term gets used as much now, but I really, really love Kale as a character. I really loved writing about that kind of, and unfortunately, I didn't write Kale where, it was never a point of view character. And I would love to write a character like that who is the point of view character, so you can get to know a little bit more, and it's really about them and not necessarily just the story they're a part of. But yeah, I agree with you. That's a good road to go down.
I'm cooking. I created a secondary character in like my last book that I sort of wrote kind of with this like idea in mind that like maybe he's gonna get his own story, and it's gonna be interesting, I think, because you develop an audience and you develop a brand, and I think there's there's a lot of unspoken pressure to stay on brand, right?
Yes. Oh yeah.
And I think about writing, you know, a trans guy main character. I think about writing like polyamorous relationships, and like
just talked about that.
I think there needs to be more of that, and yet, you know, I think there's sort of this inherent like, okay, well, it's not going to sell. Like, do it, but it's not going to sell, right? And I think there's always that. Not that sales are our sole driver, but sort of like weighing that.
You have to consider it.
Yeah.
We just talked about that with the polyamorous thing because we were rewatching the L Word Q, Generation Q or whatever, the first season. And, you know, 3 of the characters kind of have, and this is just like a throuple, but still it's like, in, you know, drastically. And it's like, it doesn't for everybody. Like, you know, I know a lot of times that does, but like some polyamorous, I don't know if we can call them couples, but relationships are super happy, super fulfilled, you know, in their relationships. And, and you just don't see that.
Decades. Like it actually, I was going to say, we have one in our extended family that's been together for decades.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it absolutely can work.
I've seen, I think there's a little bit more prevalence of like triads or sort of throuples in that. There's like a whole, you know, not to sort of out myself, but I identify as poly and, you know, have been, you know, in relationships where I'm sort of in a secondary relationship to someone, you know, who's in another. And there's just so many fascinating permutations and sort of ways of finding happiness and fulfillment. I sort of want to shine a light on that. Not that I don't sort of love the idea of like the 2 people in the happily ever after, but I think there's so much more to life and love and relationships than that, and we don't get to see it.
It's interesting that these things are happening in real life, and then as authors, you know, we want to kind of portray these relationships that we see people having and that are happy, and kind of give those people representation, you know, but then that's tricky because there can be a lot of freak out.
Yeah, and like, especially as someone, if you identify as a book as a romance, like there are some kind of tenets, right, and some rules, and you have a contract with your reader about what you're going to deliver at the end, and sort of what are some different ways that can look like. I see we're running out of time. I want to like we could have a whole hour conversation about this. But someone posted a question that I think is really interesting for our group. And since we only have a few minutes, I wanted to pitch it to y'all, which is, how do you keep butch and femme characters unique and fresh when by definition they start out as a stereotype?
I tried to do that in this one, you know, my story and opposites attract. These characters kind of came because Meghan said something, I can't remember exactly what she said, but it was something about, you know, it would be interesting.
That's literally what I said. You should subvert the stereotype in some way.
Yeah. So, you know, I tried to kind of buck the norm on those and make them a little different, and how, you know, doing that, kind of breaking that stereotype, you know, there were challenges. Each of them had challenges in their own rights because they weren't kind of fitting exactly into these boxes, and how that affected them emotionally and affected them in relationships, and how they interact with, you know, someone that they're attracted to. But I think, you know, things are stereotypes a lot of times because that's just common. You know, I think that I'm a fairly stereotypical butch in a lot of ways, but I'm okay with that.
I'd say for me, just, I mean, every character is different. So even if I have 2 butch characters, and even if they have things in common with each other, I hope that I'm making them distinct enough as people. Like I never try to have a character that like fully fits the stereotype. I always want to have something about the character that maybe defies the stereotype a little bit. So they feel more like a fully fleshed out person and not, a butch or a femme. And yeah, I mean, I think that's basically it. I do want to subvert the stereotypes more often in the future. Like, I've been thinking about the fact that I want to write different types of butch characters, especially. I've definitely, many of my butch characters definitely fall into like the my fantasy butch kind of like, mold, which is great to write about, but there's lots of other kinds of butches. And so I would like to explore them too, because really they're all delicious.
I love that. I think it's hard sometimes, because I think it is that tendency to write what we're most drawn to. And like I think that often comes up as much as like the idea of a stereotype. It's sort of like, no, I'm just writing my type.
Yeah, exactly.
But I find myself struggling and sort of not to disparage any other sort of kinds of pairings, but sometimes when I read a book that's sort of traditionally femme characters, I'm just like
high femme,
pretty lady, like great, like for me that almost feels stereotypical in a way. So I think every genre, every sort of trope or kind of pairing has to wrestle with that to a certain extent.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to say really quickly, because Lynn Carlson says, Angie, there are stories in the Library of Congress archives chronicling women as men in Civil War, which is basically Angie's favorite subgenre in the world. So I just had to point out that, like, yes, Angie is very aware of those types of stories and loves them. Yeah.
Love them. It's like, I'm a history nerd and this whole butch,
Yeah. Moving through the world, how you're perceived, it's perfect.
We did also miss one question, which was, are any of the characters in the novella collection escaping into their own full-length novels? And I think that's really tricky, because I've written 3 novellas now, and I've often had people say, oh, this should be a full-length book. But when you've kind of given characters a romantic arc, even if it's just sort of the happy for now, they're just sort of deciding that they're in love, like, it's hard to start a novel from that point. You've already given them kind of development. So like, again, maybe secondary characters kind of come out. I tend to sometimes use secondary characters from novels to write a novella. I did that with my Boss of Her. I pulled a character out of Crescent City Confidential for that. But for me, I never would take those same 2 characters and give them a full length novel, because it just feels too hard. What about y'all?
Yeah, actually, when you say that, I was just thinking, if I was I've thought about, I would love to have like a novella or something about Ava and Katrina from Sex Therapist Next Door, because their relationship is kind of developing alongside the main characters. And honestly, their relationship sounds really fun, although it's not the kind of relationship I would have necessarily thought to ever write about, like as a main book. Yeah, it'd be really neat to do that.
Meghan gets a lot of comments and requests for some of her short stories that, like The Client. She gets a lot of people say they want a novel from those characters.
Yeah.
It's a lovely compliment, right? Like,
it is. Although when you're writing a short story, it's definitely like, you don't normally, I don't know, for me, when I write something short, I'm not necessarily thinking about, to me, they don't necessarily have a bigger story to tell. Is there a bigger story to tell? Angie, the beginning of Her Best Friend's Sister was written for her birthday, and it was a novella. And then she said, well, what happened next? Because I think it basically ended when the sister walked in and sort of, found them or whatever. And then it was, I could see what, there is some more to tell about them. That's kind of an arbitrary stopping point. But for some of my books, it's hard for me to imagine bringing them into a full-length novel, because I don't necessarily know what the story would be. They've already fallen in love, like you said.
Well, we're officially a minute over, so we should probably stop talking. Logged in and joined us and listened to us ramble at each other for an hour. Thank you. I had so much fun chatting with you. I love doing that.
Yeah, me too. This was fun.
And stay tuned. There are a couple more programs this evening, and Look for more fantastic BSB programming coming up. I think we're doing the previews every month, and there'll probably be another bookathon come fall. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, folks.
Thanks everyone for the questions and comments.
Yes, thank you.